Perfect. Does anybody have any additions, removals, or adjustments to the agenda? Not seeing any hands go up on that. Public forum. Sally, I saw a public.
Yep.
Yes. Welcome. Did you have something that you wanted to ask or share, or did you just want to listen and participate?
If you're talking to me, I just wanted to listen.
That's fine. You are welcome to do that.
Thank you.
Great. Any other members have something from the public that they'd like to share, or anyone want to put a public hat on? Okay. So the first item on our agenda is the November 7th meeting minutes, and those went out on our November 17th or 8th email. 17th. They went out on the 17th. So we got the minutes. We also revised the October minutes to reflect that change. Does anybody have any, I guess, do we have a movement for the minutes? We want to move that and then we'll make a change if we need to. Somebody want to move, we accept the minutes?
I move we accept them as presented.
Thanks, Chris.
And I'll second that.
All right, we got Chris and Mike. Any changes or additions or changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? All right. So I asked people to let me know if they had any ideas they wanted to move from tier 2 to tier 1. And I only heard from a couple folks. So the only things that got added, pushed up were pedestrian path along Pine, farmers market, accessibility on trails, the land on West Pleasant for garden or other, and the bus for the recreation department. So those got bumped up. We also, let's see, there's one other thing. Ian Albinson shared some thoughts that he had. I didn't automatically put those into our mix, but I wanted to share them here in case somebody else wants to push them up there. But he noted the upgrade to financial systems and IT systems for the town, which was something on our tier 2 that had been mentioned just by one person. And the mental health social worker for the Bristol Police Department, which was also something that was on our list mentioned by one person, but not, didn't make it onto tier 1. Does anybody want to bump those up, or we'll just leave them? Remember, the select board will get the whole list and they will do as they please, but they weren't on ours. All right. So those are the only ones
Sorry,
that got.
I had to unmute. I support Ian's proposal to move the mental health help for Bristol Police. I assume it's not for the police officers, but it's for a mental health professional to be present or to be
That's
available. Yeah.
Yes, it would, to be
I also am interested in seeing more mental health available here.
Okay. So I'll put it on there and we can have that conversation as we go along. Right.
I had a question about that. I had seen that proposal before, and I guess I was just curious. So this would be a temporary position funded by a one-time dispersal of ARPA money. I guess I'm just wondering if that would be a successful hire. Like CSAC right now is trying really hard to hire, and they're offering signing bonuses, and they still aren't able to hire everyone that they want. I'm not saying we shouldn't add it to the list, but it just seems like if I were job searching, that probably wouldn't be the position that I'd be looking for. I mean, it would be much better if it were part of the town budget and like something that, you know, if you took the position, you could anticipate it going forward many, many years. But that's just my opinion.
I had the same concern with that as well, Jess, that it's going to be a tough, I mean, I knew that CSAC is in the same boat, and we really don't have the means to fund it beyond one and done. So it'd be a challenge. But we can cross that discussion once we get to those items.
We can. I don't know, Valerie, if you want to weigh in. I know this is something that the police has been looking for and has support in the community and from the select board. I'm not sure where they are in their exploration of that, or if that is going to be something that's put on the budget, or if it's still something that the select board feels like they just don't have the resources for. I'm not sure if Valerie's able to unmute.
I don't know where she is. Oh, here she
I
is.
can unmute.
Thanks.
I had to step away, so I didn't catch everything that was said.
So there's some questions about the mental health position for the Bristol Police Department. And, one of the concerns of our committee is that we are trying to steer ourselves towards, infrastructure or investment or lasting things rather than budgetary ongoing items. And there's some concern that even if we did this, that, our funding would be short-term, which would make it not only unsustainable, but also difficult to fill as a hiring position. Where
I
is this
agree.
on that process?
The select board has not had a chance to discuss it. We're on the threshold of the budget process, that it will really get hot and heavy into January. They haven't discussed it. And I believe that if they're going to do it, they need to find a way to propose the funds from a permanent source somehow, and just make it a staff position as part of the department and just do it somehow. What the police department might have access to other grant funding to support that position, just like they've had grant funding to hire a 4th police officer for 2 years. So we'll see how that goes after year 2. But I expect there'll be support to sustain that position ongoing. And the same, I believe, could be true with the counselor position. I mean, there seems to be a lot of support in the community to have such a person on staff. So I think there'd be support to including that as a new staff person in the budget as a budgeted item.
A staff person for the
In
police?
the police department. Or maybe elsewhere in town government, whether maybe in city hall or town hall, but I'm not sure where the physical space would be right now. We're on the threshold of designing a new police station, so maybe certainly we would plan to include physical office space there for such a position.
But that would be an additional staff support person for the police department.
Correct.
I I had the impression that a number of the people that I talked to thought that it was necessary to have some more psychological care available, but they weren't convinced the police department was the place for it. And I've read a lot of times that the pandemic has caused a great deal of mental problems for kids, and that some jurisdictions are using online counselors from other areas. And I mean, I realize this is late in the game to bring that up, but I feel I should bring it up, since that seems to be, if we're looking at taking care of pandemic damage, that's the big one as far as I can tell.
It seems to me, I appreciate those thoughts, Betsy. But it seems to me that the police department, police officers have direct engagement with people that are in crisis, and it would be beneficial for them to have a direct resource to support those people and others. So having that resource within the police department might be the best thing to do. The select board has not fully discussed it, even lightly discussed it. So I can't speculate on how the select board will feel about this, but I do expect that it will be a discussion item. Whether ARPA funds launch it, that's for the select board to decide.
So as a group, hearing that input, do we want to keep this on tier 1, or do we want to leave it on tier 2? Remembering, of course, that all of our ideas do go to the select board, and it's still an important thing, but it might not be on our top list. Thoughts? Thank you. Yeah, Ally.
Hi. I just in light of the situation that's happened at the elementary school and needing mental health services, I think we should keep it at a tier 1. I think it's super important that we address it, coming at it from all angles. And if this is something that could help our community, I think let's leave it at tier 1 and see what the select board has to say about it. Thanks.
And another rationale for putting it or keeping it at tier 1 is that we have a grant writing position in our tier 1, which is the exact same thing. It would be an ongoing expense, but we're suggesting that money be allocated to hire someone and hope that some other funds would come through to maintain that. So eliminating the mental health professional because it's an ongoing expense, then we would have to also eliminate the grant writing position, I think. And I would propose keeping them both.
I actually would weigh in and I would say, while it is true that the grant writing position does sort of violate our principle of ongoing expenses versus long-term infrastructure, I think it's a unique thing because that grant writing position could be generating their own funding source as they move forward. And I don't think that there's going to be a lot of options to fund that outside of our town coffers. Whereas I do think that a grant writing person could probably delve into a bunch of different pockets for equity, for mental health support, our other ARPA money in the state. So I think the grant writing person might be able to fund both positions ultimately. And I worry that if we put the police department one, that I don't want to see ARPA funds used just because they're available. And I feel like there could ultimately be other grant sources for that, which I imagine the chief is probably already looking into. But so I agree with you that they're both ongoing expenses rather than long-term investments. But I think that the grant writing one is such a unique possibility that I like leaving it in, and I'm less convinced about the mental health for police department. And I will also say, I think that there is a real important need for mental health services in the community. And I don't think that whether we put this first or second in our recommendations to the select board, it'll get brushed under the rug, the mental health for the, support for the police department. I think they'll keep moving forward, and I think it will happen ultimately. Whereas the grant writing position, I think that if we probably don't fund it, I think that probably won't happen. So that's my thought, but you guys can ultimately summarize it.
Oh. Val, you go first.
Okay. Two things. Well, one thing to consider, two things to consider. How much funding you are thinking about allocating to either position because of the timeline that the money needs to be spent, 2024, and the hiring challenges that everybody's having. And I think it may be difficult to, well, I think we have a prospective person to fill the social worker situation sooner rather than later. We just need to do it. But think about the funds allocated through ARPA and for the grant writing position, if that's selected to be funded through ARPA, and the consequence if those don't get filled, or the consequence if they get filled late. And so the full amount that's allocated doesn't get fully spent because that person comes on, later in the game. So just some thoughts.
Those are good thoughts. We
I
really,
I am concerned about the concept of first and second tier, in that I would like to be able to compare the mental health care to everything, and not to have a fixation on, what are we doing that takes asphalt, and what are we doing that takes this or that, because this, I feel this is more important, maybe more important than bathrooms, or I mean, so I don't want to have it get into a position where it can't be compared in terms of its urgency to other things.
I have two questions there, Betsy. One is, how would you propose comparing it regardless of which list it's on?
Explain to me the purpose of having two lists, please.
So we have $1.1 million, and all of the things that got mentioned that made it onto the top list, which was things that were mentioned more than once, or the second list, which is things that were mentioned once by us as a committee, pulling them from the 500 items on the big list. $1.1 million won't cover all of that. So what we're trying to do is narrow our focus to those items which we feel are most compelling. And to Valerie's point, we have not talked about allocating a set amount of money. Where we kind of started heading after the last meeting was that what we're going to do is produce a menu of preferences to the select board and encourage them to fund as much of that as they can within the timeline of funding, and using ARPA money to leverage other funds where possible, because it's impossible for us at this time to be able to take all of our ideas and identify which ones have a dollar amount of potential grant sources. We can say 80% of them have possible grant potential, but we don't know what the likelihood of us is of getting one of those grants, or whether the time frame for that grant will work out, or whether we'll need a local money to match it. So instead of trying to be detailed about, we would give X amount of money for this and assume there's going to be Y amount of grant money, what we're looking at is a menu of things that we give to the select board and say, here are I don't know, a dozen or 15 or 8, some number of items that we feel are the most important. And we will ask the community to look at that number of items and literally rank them. So each member of the community who wants to could put those items in an order of what they feel is most important. So we can give to the select board an ordered list that says, these are the 8, 12, 15, whatever that the committee thinks are important. This is the order that the community thinks they are most important. Start at the top, fund to the bottom. If you can get grant money on any of them, great. So that's why I asked the question, like, yes, we think mental health is important, but we didn't receive a number of really pressing or compelling project proposals for that. We have the police department one, which didn't make it onto a tier 2, which means it didn't got mentioned more than twice by people in our first round. And we have Turning Point, which is also a version of mental health with substance use. That is on our tier 1.
Okay, I have just put a proposal on the table, which is to use an online person. And we could say, okay, so we will, try to get counseling support online for the 3 or 4 kids who are the most suicidal, or something like that. And you wouldn't even then need to hire an entire person if you could, hire a space with someone.
So my only concern with that is, again, it goes back to the limitations of the monies, that we could only do that through 2024 and then we're done. And this is not something that goes away in 2024.
Well,
The-
suicidal tendency can go away fairly quickly if it's dealt with.
The lingering effects and what we see as a society is not going to go away in 2024. If we're gonna, as a community, work towards resolving some of the mental health issues that have occurred, it's short-sighted to think we can do it in a one-year period. I am a firm believer that we do need these services. We do need to figure out how to fund them. And I think it's beyond our scope and scale of what we could do effectively for our community, and that the select board needs to be aware of the issue and how we feel about it. But I feel that they need to step up, whether it's through, this employee becomes a town employee that is shared between the police and everybody, whether it's a combination of police and they coordinate telemedicine, whatever goes down. I believe the select board needs to run with it as their project, and it's beyond our scope and scale because it is a long-term issue that isn't, it may get better, but it's not going away in that time frame. And that's just my very concerning piece, is that if we fund this and it just stops, nobody's going to talk about it before the funding runs out and the whole thing just sort of dies and fails. And the last thing we want to do is fail at mental health.
Well, you're talking about how we fix it as a society, which I don't exactly understand. I'm thinking in terms of intervention for specifically at-risk people, because I mean, part of the suggestions that came with the ARPA information was look for even individuals who have been financially slammed because of the pandemic. So I'm thinking, why can't we look for individuals who have been slammed and help a group of individuals? Suppose we help 5 individuals
The challenge, Betsy,
to stay alive, compared to, we're also looking at proposals to add possibly 5 childcare positions for Bristol. So there we're talking about individuals.
So the challenge, Betsy, is that that neither the ARPA committee nor the select board is in a position to, hire to provide mental health services, say, creating an online service. So, when we look at our lists, we need to be able to recommend a thing to do. So we can say in our report, mental health services are clearly needed, and we encourage the select board to continue to look for ways to support that, or to encourage that, or to facilitate that. But to say that we think you should spend money to hire or to make available online mental health services, we don't have a vehicle or a venue or a program for that. Whereas the other things on our list are more vehicle or program related. And this was sort of the question that I think Mike had raised a couple of meetings ago, is, because of the way we went through this process, we didn't end up with solution proposals for some really important things like affordable housing or for mental health. And we had this question 2 meetings ago, is, do we want as a committee to try to beat the bushes to come up with those? And the answer was no. So I think that while I'm definitely hearing from everyone, including you, Betsy, that we should be sure that our report ultimately stresses the importance of mental health, that we don't have something in front of us to fund. So I don't know how we put that on the list.
And was our original mandate obliging us to come up with the program that would do it? I thought that was the job of the select board.
So while even if we pawn that off on the select board, using ARPA money, honestly, we could set aside $50,000 for this position today. By the time the select board, if we hand it to them with no plan, and which by the time they get through it and get somebody, come up with the concept, hire somebody in, we're out of money. The money deadlines probably will have come and gone. Town government doesn't move fast. I know that. I work in it every day. So I would be very concerned about allocating, again, stressing the importance and stressing the backing of these positions to the select board is very imperative. That we as a committee understand it's just like the housing issue. We know it's a damn problem, but we don't, as this committee, have the means to address it and or fix it. But by making sure that the select board is aware of the importance of it and how strongly we feel behind it is, I think, would go a long ways.
Okay, thank you.
So I want to make sure that we, are fair to this idea. I don't know if we want to vote as a group. Do we want to put the idea of remote mental health work for children? Like, how do we want to proceed here? Betsy, do you want that? Do you want to put a proposal forward to get a second and have people vote whether we want to see that show up on a list? Or do we want to, by consensus, just agree that we want mental health to be stressed in our report? I want to give you a chance, Betsy, to say how you want to see us move forward so you feel that this was acknowledged.
I think you could just say that mental health services are one of the outstanding needs that has been raised by the pandemic.
Okay.
Possibly the most outstanding need that has been raised by the pandemic, and that we, like every other municipality, should get to work very quickly on that.
Okay. And then the second thing was we were talking about moving things to the tier 1, and we kind of started with this idea of the Bristol Police Department mental health support person. Do we add it to tier 1? And then we discussed it. Where do people stand on that? Do we feel like we still want to see that on 1? Or are we going to leave that on 2 and let that be addressed with this need for mental health as well? What's your pleasure, folks?
I like the
feel
latter.
like the way that conversation just went, that it doesn't go on the list because of how that whole conversation just played out, and we stress the importance of mental health in maybe a accompanying document along with some other statements we believe are true and important.
Okay.
I agree with Rob on that. Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. So are we good then to move on to item number 3, review the ranking survey? And does that change anything about tier 1? Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, so I realized that as you were going through the items that were identified to move up tiers, that I failed technology. It did not fail me, and I never hit send on my email earlier this
Okay.
week. So just, I understand time limit has passed, but there were 2 items that I have now sent to you, being just
Okay.
expansion of municipal wastewater and parking solutions. So
Oh. Okay.
that was my piece on that.
What am I going to do about that?
Whatever you would
Well,
like.
Okay. Oh, here's what I'm going to do about that. So what was it called? Just tell us again, Rob, those 2 things.
Expansion of municipal wastewater,
Okay.
because with all these development ideas and fixing up old homes and dividing them apart, wastewater is still a limiting factor there for development. And the other one was parking solutions, whether it be studies or building of something or whatever. Who knows?
Okay.
Maybe somebody comes up with a great one-way all the way around Bristol solution.
And Rob, those weren't even on our tier 2, were they?
They were. It was
Were they?
lumped to that stuff was lumped together in one
Somewhere.
3-part thing that I had put
Mhm.
forward originally.
I'm not seeing it, but Oh, here it is. Yes, support for potential zoning changes to increase density, increase sewer capacity, increase parking.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will move that up. Let me just put my arrows on. Okay,
Sorry about that. I clearly.
okay,
failed.
that's all right.
One job, Rob, one job.
Okay, I'll try to remember to get that done.
Val has her hand up.
Thank you. And I think Ally might have too. So Valerie?
Yes, on the wastewater, a few years ago, the select board, the town, prepared a preliminary engineering report about trying to expand the capacity of the current wastewater system to accept more material by pre-treatment. And the 4 options that were presented were very, very expensive, over $600,000. And it stopped there. I think that study needs to be redone for a number of different reasons. And what paid for it at the time was a planning grant through the DWSRF state or maybe it was the Clean Water. No, that was the DWSRF revolving loan fund through the state. It's a 2% interest, some of which might be forgivable, 50%, up to 50% might be forgivable. It takes time. So I'm just saying that there's a likely funding source to do a scoping study to develop a plan. Right now, there's no plan. We need to have an engineering type plan in order to be able to expand the sewer system, the network, the district, perhaps. That's been on my radar to expand the district, not only increase the allowable acceptage from current businesses like the restaurants and seating, not only the wastewater itself, but like the brewery and to increase seating in the restaurants, but to expand the district. But we need to pre-treat the material to allow it to meet all the required details. So I'm just saying that the town did try this. There is a funding source. It's a lengthy process. It's a pain in the butt, but it's doable.
Great.
It's on at least my radar. I think others too.
How much would the study cost?
I honestly don't recall. I think it was, something tells me it was around the $23,000 range. Scoping studies generally don't cost that much from my general experience, but I'd have to look back at it more specifically.
Right, and there was discussion. You may have been at the planning level, Rob, but maybe not with this group, but we had talked about even looking at not just expansion of the existing system, but possibly a wastewater treatment plant for townwide.
I don't think the system where it's currently located has the physical capacity for townwide. I think we might be able to move the boundaries out a little bit to capture the gas station next door and some of the other the buildings upper on West Street, up the post office and the other Howden Hall, and maybe up North Street, the apartments and some of the other residences that in that direction. But I'm doubtful that it could physically go much beyond that. And also think of the piping and all that stuff.
And I didn't know if anybody, Alan previously or anybody else had looked at, community systems, smaller kind of segmented things or step systems that are
decentralized wastewater
Yeah.
systems. Yes. That's an excellent idea. And again, we have the DWSRF funding source can offer planning loans for those kinds of things. And actually construction loans too, but it's as anything with the state, it's lengthy, it's cumbersome, and it takes time.
Thank you, Valerie.
Mhm.
So I'd like to move on to the next item. Are we good with that, folks? Okay. So we sent out this ranking survey. 7 people filled it out. Don't share yet. And I want to acknowledge that, you know, the way that the questions were set up was not perfect. And I want to thank Betsy for her excellent analogy. She said, you know, Porter, some of these survey questions are kind of like, you know, did you stop kicking your dog yet? Yes or no? And there's no place for you to say, I never kicked my dog in the first place.
Right.
So that was an excellent point that she made. And I appreciate that this was not a perfect survey. But I want to thank you all for the most part for, you know, making an effort there to try to say, you know, with each of these items that we have, how do I feel that they solve these issues or they relate to these things? So thank you for doing that. We have the results back from that. I'm going to share it with you and we'll talk about that. I want to acknowledge that because of the timing, the way that some of your things to move up to list 2 got to me, they didn't make it onto the list. So, you know, the land on West Pleasant for the garden, the bus for the recreation department, and of course, the supporting zoning changes for density, sewer capacity, and parking, they're not on there. But the way that it comes back is in a little graph chart that shows, you know, how each one weighs. And then what we did is we took, so, you know, do you want to show the chart? Just show people what that looks like. I think it's that one.
Mhm. I don't know what you do.
Computer's thinking. It'll take a minute.
So while it's thinking, oh, there we go. One question I had, I was confused by the 1, 3, and 4, as far as the options,
Right.
were things that we had as sort of our quote unquote core values, and then help the neediest residents. I'm not certain where that came from.
So a couple meetings back, when I kept talking about serving the most residents and, you know, enduring investment and leveraging, a committee member brought up the idea, you know, well, are we interested in the most residents or the neediest residents? And so that question got split out there.
Right. That was just one. I was like, I don't remember that being.
Yeah, it was originally the most residents. We wanted to do the most good, but that question came up, well, do we want to do the most good or do we want to, you know, the ARPA money is for the people who got hit the hardest? So that's how that ended up in there. So.
What's that?
What's that? Maybe it's background noise. So anyway, so I thought to scroll through 12 pages of this would be kind of hard. But I just wanted you to see it. So you can see orange is where people said it would considerably address that issue. Red is to a fair extent, and blue is somewhat. So if we look at the very first example here, or even just whatever. So, okay, so I think the very top one is like the Wren's, is that the Wren's precinct?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at the first question, serve the most residents. 2 people said considerably. So 2 times 3, because that's a weight of 3 equals 6. 2 people said to a fair extent. So 2 times 2, so that gets a 4. And the blue is somewhat, 3 people said somewhat, so that is a 3. So you take 6 plus 4 plus 3, and you get 13 for that. And you can do that for all 4 of these, for everything on the list. And so each one will get a value. So what that would mean is that for that particular example, the Wren's Nest expansion would have a value of 59 if you added all those up. Does everybody sort of understand how that would work out math-wise?
Yep.
Yes, and it equally weights those 4 categories. Serves the most residents, helps the neediest residents, et cetera.
That's right.
And
yeah,
we have
we
to decide if that really is appropriate.
Right.
But that's
So,
okay.
right, we may have asked the right or wrong questions. We may have given you poor selection for options. This is not the best or most scientific survey on the planet, but we were just looking for a way to try to rank them in somewhat and just see what that does for us. I will also say that, you know, that there, you know, Betsy had said a couple meetings ago, she didn't really think we should do this at all. That she didn't think that we needed to take our committee thoughts and overlay them on anything. So we can decide, what we want to do with this, which could be nothing. Just go ahead and mute yourself, folks, if you got background noise. So I'll show you what the math looks like for adding that up, and that's that other sheet. And basically what I did is I took all of the things on, I think it's the email right there, the top one, maybe. Yeah, it's that. So it has the survey weight, and this is just the things on page 1.
Can people see that right now? It's a list instead of the graphs.
I can see just a graph,
I'll fix it. I just want to make sure. I didn't think so. That's why I was like, I better ask. There. Now can you all see a list?
Yes,
Perfect.
can you make it any bigger so it's easier to read?
Yeah, just double click the email on the left, it'll make it big, but then you might have to share that stuff.
Can you, yeah, but I still can't increase the size of it here. And that's what I was afraid. That's as big as I've got, Betsy, at the moment. I don't have an easy way to fix that.
Are you seeing just the screen, or are you seeing all his email?
I see emails over on the side. I see,
Okay, yeah, can you fix that? How did it go?
There, now it's the one on the left.
Actually, I learned a trick, or not a trick so much, but when you have the share screen up there or your other, down in the right-hand corner of your screen, there should be a little slide bar. And you can move that slide bar to change the size.
there's a slide bar across the bottom and one up and down.
I think that's
That's different. That's a different slide bar. I mean, this
Yeah,
is for the host. This is for the person
Oh.
who's sharing their screen.
Okay,
Yeah, they can,
Well, anyway, be that as it may. We'll send this out. You can see this, but I just wanted you to be able to get a sense. So really, there were only 4 items that ranked 60 or above. So that's sort of interesting. So we can decide that this is not the best survey in the world, but there were 4 that ranked noticeably higher, or at least a couple of them somewhat noticeably higher than any of the others. So the rescue squad upgrades actually hit it out of the park with a 72. That was sort of surprising. I think, 2 people had mentioned that it made it onto our list, but that hit pretty high. The grant writing position, again, got a 66, and Turning Point got 66. And then the Bristol Family Center was a 60, and Wren's Nest was a 59. So those 2 were pretty high up there. Then most of them were between 50 and 57. So, they all did pretty well. Bike racks were a 49, dog park was a 41.
Which is ironic that the top 3 didn't fall under the dominant trends that we saw between focus groups, between with the community input. I mean, it's awkward.
Well, except I think that, mental health services, I don't know. I feel like Turning Point is a little bit, I think the grant writing position gives us lots of options, and rescue squad upgrades. I mean, that's certainly a COVID.
Oh, no, I agree, but those weren't
Housing,
housing.
childcare,
care.
transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point.
It didn't hit any of those.
Yeah.
But childcare does make it high
It
up.
does. Yep, that would be
Yeah, it was, like I said, it's just the first 3 that threw me
4
off.
and 5.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everything else sort of fit sort of where I expected it.
yeah. So I think we can talk about this for just 5 minutes of other first impressions, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do with this, which is pretty much not much, but that's okay. I mean, I think it's really fine. It just gives us another way to look at it, right? One way to look at it was, how many of us moved it to our top list? Another way to look at it is when we look at the top list, how does it go through this ranking period? And I think it's fine. I don't think that we need to make choices necessarily from here. And we'll talk about that in our next item, but
I do worry a little bit about equally weighting the 4 categories,
yeah,
because I in my mind, would this project leverage the possibility for independent funding, or was the least important? I mean, we haven't talked about the importance of the various categories.
Yeah.
So therefore, to view them as all equivalent might be moving some things on this list higher or lower because people, I don't know why. I feel as though we should talk about that.
Helen, and I think we'll send you, we'll send all of you the weighting chart, and you could play that game yourself, right? You could take the math and then say, I think category number 1 or category number 3 is more important. And I'm going to, double that one, or,
Well,
whatever.
I feel as though we as a committee have to talk about, should we be waiting? It doesn't really matter what I alone think.
Okay.
Do we think that all of these should be viewed equivalently? Do we think that 3 are more important than all 4? Is 1 the most important? And we just haven't done that.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at this personally as another tool that we have in our arsenal. I don't think this is the end all be all. It's good to see ideas converted to data and or graph so that we have we are able to talk it through. Just because the dog park only got a 41 doesn't mean that it doesn't stay in the list of discussion. It just shows sort of where it falls in things, and just again, it gives us some statistical data to work from. So I'm comfortable with it. I think it's a tool. It's not an end all be all.
I
Can I
think
ask?
it's important that the select board really did want us to be pulling in a lot of different ideas, just to poll their constituents and find out what people want. And I don't think that that we need to regard any of it as a failure because we can't put 20 things forward, but that it's important that they know. I mean, like the housing situation, that is not a quick fix, and it's not a cheap fix, but it's something that is really needed, and it's something that the select board can know has community support. So I think that some of this list will just help to make conscious direction for the way in which Bristol is governed going forward. That's what I hope.
Allison.
I have a question. So when I'm looking at this, I see that Wren's Nest is listed there. However, when we did the survey, I feel like it said Wren's Nest, Howden Hall, and something else. So I'm wondering if those other items that were listed there need to have their own line.
Well,
Because-
I think what happened, Ally, was originally we had basically we had one item for childcare, got 4 votes to be on our first list 3 meetings ago. And it said improve or expand existing childcare. And then it said Bristol Family Center / Wren's Nest, and then question mark or retrofit Howden Hall, the hub. So those are things that came up in conversation. And to be fair, when Jessica took our list and made questions, she separated that into 2 questions, which was Wren's Nest or Bristol Family Center. Howden Hall and the hub still stayed there as question marks. But I think that we really only had a proposal for Wren's Nest expansion and Bristol Family Center sprinkler system. So those were really the only 2 actual things. The question of, could there be childcare at Howden Hall? Could there be childcare at the hub? Sort of got bounced around, but we never had an actual proposal to do those. So I don't think that we necessarily need to ask questions on those. I think we need to just cross out Howden Hall and the hub and leave it with these 2 projects. But someone could correct me if I made a mistake on the assumptions there.
So are Howden Hall and the hub not on the list at all? And is that because there's no specific proposal? Because that's the same for half the list, that there's no specific proposal.
Yes and no. So the difference being that a lot of the things that have no specific proposal, like say solar panels on the town or school properties, make the town electric, bury power lines, or
Accessibility on trails. That's pretty
Right.
broad.
yeah. Well, it's also pretty low on the list, but
Yeah,
yes, you're right. And
I'm just
that's
saying
because-
you gotta stick to it. If that disqualifies things from being on the list, then it's gotta go across the board.
I would, the only reason, Rob, I would say that I would be fine with removing those two is they were just sort of general, sort of overarching, maybe kind of thing that we discussed. The actual Wren's Nest upgrade, I could see that staying as its own standalone. If we wanted to have an option, possibly explore retrofitting existing buildings for daycare as a third option, that might be a better way to deal with that. I think tying the two together was hard.
The other
Yeah,
thing is
because
that
I know the hub had a bunch of different proposals too, you know.
did the hub have a proposal for childcare?
Well, that's where the confusion is that the hub upgrade doesn't deal with childcare, which is what it's sort of grouped the Wren's Nest. And I had the same mental conundrum you're having, Rob, that the hub and the skate park are separate from the childcare dilemma that we've got, in that I couldn't tie the two together. That's how I broke them out in my head.
I can
think
clear up
right-
the confusion on that one. During the focus group, when Wren's Nest came to our focus group to talk about childcare and child services, they suggested maybe building out existing space as just a sort of cost saving measure. So that's how those two ended up there. The rec center, or the hub did put forward a couple of proposals about buying a bus. And then also maybe expanding their space so that they could have like a larger gear locker and other things that people could borrow or use from the community. And then there was also where is it on the list? The skate park upgrade. Those were their suggestions. So that's why that ended up in there two ways, because Wren's Nest, Tasha was talking about using either Howden Hall or the hub as if they could be expanded in their space.
So I don't remember it being that way. I feel like Howden Hall was just something that it could be possibly retrofitted. I don't believe Tasha brought up Howden Hall, but that's just from my recollection. But I do think that Chris had just said, like maybe having something as exploring possibilities of currently owned buildings that the town owns. I think that would be great, because I think that it did make the list, and it possibly can fill that need that we have for the need of childcare.
So are you proposing that we add a third line item for childcare that is explore existing spaces to create a childcare?
I would.
Can you say it again?
Are you proposing that because we had the Bristol Family Center, we had Wren's Nest, and then we had Howden Hall and the hub question marks, are you suggesting that we should have Bristol Family Center, the Wren's Nest expansion, and then a third line which says explore existing buildings to create a childcare center? And if you're proposing that, my question is, who would do that? So Rob, your point is a good one, that we have a lot of vague suggestions, but in every scenario here, there's either somebody who does it, somebody who could logically do it, or it could reasonably be a municipal effort. So whether you're talking about, the roof on the ice rink or the dog park, or even accessibility on trails, there's either somebody in town who's already doing those things, or it could reasonably be a municipal effort. But if we're talking about creating a new childcare center by retrofitting existing buildings, I don't think the select board is in a position to sort of do that, but maybe I'm wrong. But that's why I do feel like that's a little bit different. The idea of like create a new childcare in existing facilities or explore or examine. I think that's a little trickier. But I also am not clear what the committee's goal is. Like, are you feeling like we really do need like that? That's what you meant when you put it on list one, is we should be exploring buildings.
I
Is-
have a question about that from reading the Wren's Nest proposal that I have in my packet.
Yeah.
Which said that what they would like to do is they would like to move and buy
Right.
maybe
They
buy
have a
some,
proposal for a building.
perhaps a building, or buy some land and build a building.
Yes.
And that's a very long-term situation for which they were offering us 5 spaces for prioritizing Bristol people for 5 spaces. So and we don't know, I mean, maybe you know where the building is that they're thinking about.
But Betsy, just not to go too far in the weeds there
Yeah.
with that proposal, they have a specific proposal to, that would allow them to expand childcare. So the question on the table is, does this committee want to have a third line item on our tier 1 of recommendations that says explore existing buildings to create a childcare center?
Well, I thought that was one of the things that Wren's Nest was considering.
They're going to do their own
Yeah,
thing.
they're separate now. Just for the sake of, because I think we can have a longer discussion. I think this could turn into a long-term item. I would be comfortable adding it to the list at the moment. We can revisit it as I think just sitting here trying to spitball it scares me a little bit, because I think this is bigger than what we could do here in the next 4 minutes or so.
Okay.
But
Right.
keeping it either as an agenda item that we talk about at the next meeting, or we can add it now. I'm good either way.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. Because on the form, the list, when we had like the 39 pages of what have you, that all of the information, like, it was in category 2 for childcare, and it said, can we invest in what already exists? And then in quotation marks, it said Hub, ELP, Wren's Nest, instead of recreating infrastructure. So I think it went from there, and then Wren's Nest and Howden Hall got kind of lumped together. I guess it's neither here nor there, but I just.
No, but you're right. And the reason that happened, Allison, is because when we were trying to make list number 1, it got mentioned by 4 different people, and they didn't all mention the same thing. So I lumped them together for childcare because they made it on the list. Childcare had 4 votes. Then we separated it for the survey because that seems to make the most sense. And now the question is, should we have separated it further? And I guess because I would have to go back and see what those 4 people said who made it on here. What did you 4 people really want? Did you really want to invest in an existing childcare, or did you want to explore existing spaces to create a new childcare? And I think, again, it was conflated because Wren's Nest at the time wasn't sure what they wanted to do, but
Right.
now they have a very explicit proposal. They want to buy land and build a structure. So that changed too. So we did have a lot of moving parts there. And I guess the
Sure.
question point, as Chris said, is those of you who said that you wanted to see that did what you want, is there anybody on the committee who thinks that what we really should do is encourage the select board to explore existing structures to create new childcare space? And if so,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Then
yes, right? They already have this space. Can they do it? If it's a no, then it's a no, but at least it was like, here's this building. It's not really being occupied or what have you. I think,
Wait.
yes, let's just do it.
You want to put Howden Hall and the Hub on the list, or just any building?
Howden Hall is actually
Exploration.
Howden Hall is actually fully occupied. The
It is.
Oh, it
upstairs
is. Oh, okay.
And
is
the Hub
occupied
is-
by the Historical Society in a really big way. I mean, they occupy every inch of the upstairs, and it's remarkable. And the bottom space is meeting space, and it gets used by
Okay.
a lot of different organizations, AA and other groups, and it could be used for occasional child events, but it's fully occupied.
Oh, okay. All right, then, never mind.
Right. And the,
Thank
and the
you.
hub is a teeny tiny space that is designed for teens and would probably be tough because the teens come in after school and the childcare would be, still happening.
Childcare would not be compatible with the hub
Right.
space as it's currently occupied and configured. It's fully occupied as well.
Rob,
Not to diverge, but I'm gonna, anyway, I think this kind of highlights a problem with our process, our short timeline. I know we're short on time tonight, I don't know if it maybe is worth taking a small step back and kind of reassessing what will be put forward to the select board in terms of, should we put forth categories or something to that effect, that this is what ARPA money should be used for, broad strokes, because we're starting to get really lost on the minutia, which is really easy to do, and it's not really minutia, but the macro level of all this stuff.
that's a perfect segue, Rob, to our next item, which is to develop a plan to add any information needed to the ideas like details and costs. And so, yeah, I think you're right, Rob, because we're not taking this list and going to the select board tomorrow. We're planning to make a recommendation to the select board after town meeting. So we're not in a hurry. Nothing, that we're not in any kind of emergency situation. We're just playing with this material and looking at it in different ways. So one of the questions to take us to the next level is there stuff that we need, details and costs? And I was tasked with having a conversation with Valerie between our two meetings about grant money, potential availability, and, what type of details, they might hope to get at the select board. And coming out of that conversation, what I wanted to share with this committee is that I feel like that we can do something, similar to what Rob is suggesting, is we can say, here's our report, here's the information that we heard. These are, the most important themes, and we want to see, the select board take that into consideration. However, here's the ideas that we got. And we'll have them, a short list and ranked, but I don't think it's going to be very short. And we encourage them to, use the ARPA money to do as many of the things on this menu as they can, while availing themselves as much grant money as possible, so that the ARPA money will go further. We don't have to decide any of that now, but to our point about details and costs, I don't feel like that it's within our skill set or our task, job description, if you will, to feel like we need to add a whole lot of additional detail at this point to these. But I do want to spend January talking about these ideas and how we might put them forward to the select board, how far we think our 1.1 million might go with these ideas, whether we want to suggest that they all get funded at a certain level, or that the select, like how we do that. So I think that we can spend our January meeting, as Rob suggested, talking about how that might work and how that might look before we then decide, what our shorter list is to go forward with, because maybe it's everything on list number one. And remember, the select board gets all of the lists.
Yes. So one of the things that, there's a handful of, a small percentage that we have estimated dollars against. So
Right.
when we have that information, I think we could include
Plug it
that,
Okay.
just sort of as an estimated cost, like we know that
Yeah.
Wren's Nest, say 2, the BFC was about 100, the Mason's thing, I think they threw out 50,
50.
60 grand.
Yeah, the rescue SWAT upgrades were maybe 60.
So I
Okay.
think when we have dollars associated, we could add it as an estimated, just again,
Ballpark.
as an indicator.
Yep.
Not necessarily as a decider, but as an indicator.
Will do.
And if people wanted to go and do some of their own personal research to find out what it would cost to build a dog park, I'm just choosing a random example. and wanted to come back with that information to the group, that's great. I don't think as a group we can do it though. How's that?
I think it's reasonable for us to have our sort of ballpark list add up to a lot more than 1.1 million because of the likelihood that some of the programs the select board will set aside and say, well, we're gonna, we know there's some other funding coming down the pike and we'll save that. So
Right.
if they've deleted some of our important things, then we need to have the runners up there listed too.
Yep, I agree fully.
All right, Chris is helping us stay on time here. So Valerie, we apologize. Jessica, we apologize. We have about 7 minutes for a quick update on your class.
Yes.
And we would be happy to hear from them in January as well.
Great. And they'll have more detailed data to give you then. So far they've been interviewing select board members in Middlebury, Weybridge, Bristol, and Virgins. And they've been also doing surveys with select board members throughout Addison County, as well as the general public. So they're just starting to analyze some of that data. The survey just closed today. But what we're finding so far is that none of the other towns are seeking public input. Virgins and Weybridge would like to, but they don't know how to proceed. And so they haven't done that so far. Middlebury says that they will not seek public input because they worry that the public will be frivolous and give them frivolous ideas. And that, you know, the public had their input when they voted for the select board members. So they have rolled their entire budget into public works. They've already committed about 650,000 of it for a wastewater upgrade or expansion. And the rest of it will just be used by public works. So on their normal, you know, infrastructure budget, sidewalks, roads, that sort of stuff. So they don't view that money as a special investment or an extra investment. They simply view it as part of their budget. And they don't plan on creating any sort of special projects. Weybridge has already committed some money to Maple Broadband, but for the rest of what they'd like to do, they do want public input. They think that their citizens have really good ideas, and they've talked about how collaborative they are as a community. They just don't know what to do. So they're actually watching you. So actually Bristol is ahead of everyone as far as no one else even has a list of ideas or has thought much about spending this money or a process to decide these ideas. So Middlebury rolled their money over. Weybridge and Virgins are sort of sitting back and hoping to figure it out at some point after they get through their budgets for this year. Virgins also does want public input, but they're sort of divided on how much they want. They seem to be a little bit scarred by the police citizen commission or whatever that thing is called. So half of the council, the city council says, yes, we want public input and we want as much of it as possible. And the other half says, no, thank you. You know, you voted for us and we'll take over and make the decisions. So they seem to have sort of a division and they haven't exactly figured out what they want to do next. So they're actually watching you. So both Virgins and Weybridge are trying to learn from what's happening in Bristol. So that's what we have so far, but we'll have a lot more information for you after another couple of weeks. And we'll put together a formal presentation, which we can either give to you and or the select board, or we can record it and share the recording with you, whatever works best.
Wow.
Thank you. I think this is just an opportunity for us to give a little round of Bristol, Vermont, best town ever.
Exactly. That's what my students said too. And they also said that the most fun they've had so far was going to the ARPA meeting, and they all love Chris.
Just so you know, that doesn't get said very often.
All right. Any other business or anything else?
Next meeting.
So
Hold on.
Oh.
Porter, will you send out the data?
Yeah.
The result of the, so that some of us who want to play with things. can consider
Absolutely.
it? Right.
Yeah. And when the bulk of next meeting will be to just talk about our lists and our, information and how we're going to move forward. So if we want to weight things differently and play the game again, we can do that too.
Great.
Awesome.
So yeah, next meeting, we've been the first Monday, which is January 2nd. That's a holiday, right?
Technically.
So what's going on with the select board in January, Val?
They are meeting, they're planning to meet every Monday, not the 2nd, I don't think. But the 9th and the other ones that follow, the three, I just pulled out my calendar. The 3 Mondays in January, the 9th, 8th, 16th, and 23rd. They have to have everything finished. Budget done, warning posted by Thursday, January 26th. And they're
So-
getting a late start on the budget, by the way. So
you guys, what do you think of meeting on the 2nd? I'm not gonna be hungover or anything.
That's the day after anyways. That's like 2 days after.
Yeah.
The first is.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I was gonna say not 2 days of hangover.
okay, 2nd.
And-
I won't. Hey, Diane, hi, you got your hand up. Did you want to say something, Diane? Okay.
Apparently not.
Oh. Okay,
So we'll just stick with the 2nd. Great. And so then we can meet at 7 because there's no select board meeting that night.
sounds good.
All right. So
Can I add one piece of information that I forgot? Sorry. Turning Point has also asked every town for money, and some of the towns are considering funding Turning Point. They've also asked for part of the state's opioid settlement. So that's just a little bit of background. Sorry, I had that jotted down and forgot it.
Thank
no,
you.
that's really good information. And the town gives them an annual appropriation.
Perfect.
okay. So Jessica, is the 2nd too soon for your students?
Nope, we will be ready.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank
great.
you.
So see you all in January on the 2nd at 7, and we'll send some stuff out.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Thank
Have a good night, all.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thank you so much, Porter and Chris.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Thank you.